Ja, hallo, herzlich willkommen zum heutigen Vordergrundgespräch. I will switch into English because this will be in English anyway. Welcome all of you. Thank you for coming to this background talk. We have looking forward to Mephistoland, which actually starts at 8:30. But I'm glad to have here Oliver FRJLIC and ANDRAS DÖMÖTÖR, and as well Sami Kamis. He will be doing the moderation with me, and maybe you also know. And first of all, we would like to talk a bit on Mephistoland, or why ANDRAS, is the director of the play, did the play, what is it, the topics he's dealing about, and then we would like to talk a bit more further on these topics of censorship, self-censorship, and the situation in Croatia, Hungary especially, and looking a bit forward. So that's why I would like to ask you, Andras, to talk a bit about how did it come that you choose the topic or that you choose the play, and how was it to make it? Actually, you did it here in the studio and not in Budapest, but maybe you can talk a bit about your own starting point.
Hello, I would also like to welcome you first. Mephistoland was actually just one of the several ideas we had, and Sherman is here, and she was one of those who helped to make this decision. The starting point was that we should do something about the political changes that we all sense and see in Europe, and especially in Hungary and Poland. Also with a very different background in Sweden or in Denmark, also in France, that we see that the right wing, the new upcoming of the right wing, and the starting point was to find a story for that, to find a frame, and we collected a lot of ideas, and to use Klausmann's novel, The Mephisto, was one of them, and we had a huge list, and then I can't really remember. I was talking with Holger Kuhler, he's also here. He was the dramaturg, and he said that there was a meeting of the dramaturgs, and Sherman said that probably we should start with the Mephisto. So we started to work with the novel and started to use it as a starting point. And if any of you will come to see the show, then you will see that we actually didn't really use too much of that after all. But we used our own stories. That was actually, it's also important that the idea was to find a classical story or a frame that a lot of people probably know, and to collect our own experiences and stories that we have as theater makers, filmmakers, artists in a quite uncomfortable and strange political situation in Budapest.
But I would insist that you are really dealing with this topic. I mean, you are not retelling Mephisto, you are dealing in a new situation, what we will find now or in today, but the theme of the novel, the question of participation, or what is your own position when the system changed, what can the artist do, or what is he doing, and how he deals with it, is actually what you really did. So I think you should explain a bit more, and not just saying that it has nothing to do with it.
Yeah, I mean, if you know Mephisto, there is also a great movie from this story, from this novel. Then you know that it's the story of one man who starts as an liberal, partly red communist artist in Hamburg, and that's at the end of the 1920s, already the beginning of the 30s, and then as the power of the Nazis raise, he suddenly finds himself on the side of the Nazis and becomes very famous, and he becomes the man of power. But this is, Mephisto is just the story of one person, and as we had a lot of motifs, as just I said, our own stories, we decided to somehow to use Mephisto, the story of Mephisto, as a phenomenon, and to say that we follow the story of 5, 6, 7 different characters who react differently on the situation. So there are motifs of Hendrik Höfgen, or that's the name of this character in the novel, and there are completely different perspectives of the story too in our Mephistoland. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, but maybe
I was disappointing. What were you expecting?
No, I just want you to describe a bit more the situation chronologically, or exactly what happened in Budapest when this direction changed. Yes. So then, as well, that Oliver can attribute this experience.
There's a national theater in Budapest where I also worked in 2009. And it was led by a great theater director and intendant named Alföldi Robert. And he was not re-elected in 2000, I think it was 14, I guess. It's a pity, I can't really remember. But there was a clear political change, and the man who's very close... Actually, I also think I don't know if they play football together. Actually, he's quite fat for playing football, but this new intendant probably is also a friend of Orban. I mean, the friends of Orban play football with him, and this intendant it's just, I wanted to say that probably they play football, but then he just appeared in front of my eyes. I'm quite sure he cannot really move. I also met him. He's like, I mean, he couldn't sit. I'm sorry, it's too personal, I'm sorry. So, yeah, but he's really like, okay. No, I think it has something to do with theater, that there are theater directors who become, with the power, bigger and bigger and bigger. And that was also an idea for Mephistoland, that we will try to make the characters becoming more and more fat. But we didn't have enough money, and there are too many changing of the roles, so then finally we didn't use this idea. Okay, back to your question. I really want to answer that. So the intendant who ran the older one, who ran a quite good theater, and it really was a successful theater, he was not re-elected. There was a clear political decision. Before this political decision were made, there were demos. Like fascists were in front of the theater, saying that this liberal, gay, Jewish intendant should go. There cannot be a Jew. There cannot be a gay or a Jew who runs the theater, and so it was like a quite huge political issue then. And so this man needed to go away, and that was also the end of some years' work that really built up a great ensemble there. And they were rehearsing Mephisto, Klaus Mann's Mephisto, in the last year. And they played it, they had the premiere and then played it really a few times, and then that was over of his intendancy. And that was like one of the stories we used. I mean, I think we used more than 20 real stories that we collected. We made interviews. As I told you, also use our own experiences. I wrote it with 2 other guys. I'm not the only author of the play. And this was one of the starting points. So we said Mephisto, and let's use the story of this. So there is a theater in Mephistoland where they start to rehearse Mephisto, and then you will come hopefully and see what's happening with it. Did I answer the question now?
Somehow, yes.
Okay.
Oliver, you were also an intendant, but you didn't have the time to get really fat. You were only 2 years working in Rijeka. How can I imagine? Because now something come to my mind. Because if the question from Mephisto for me is referring to this actor, how in your own possibility, how have you positioned yourself to the system? You want to go on working, and then you have to participate. And so, where's your own weakness, or what is your position? But if you are an intendant or a chief of institution, you don't really have this kind of. I don't know how to say in English, the white. Strange. It's just yes or no. You are in charge, and then you can do something, or you are out of charge. It's not that you can really like looking for a way how maybe an actor or actress can do. How was your experience being the chief of an institution under such circumstances?
In Croatia, we have 5 national theaters, and I saw this opportunity as the opportunity to extend what I usually do in my theatrical work. So I thought that now, instead of doing just one play in a theater, I'm going to use the whole institution and perform in broader social context. And I can say I found strategies how actually to mobilize the whole society regarding what we did in this theater. We try to change the paradigm of national theater, because usually those institutions are used as containers for conservation of national identity, especially since we got this new Minister of Culture, which is partly known here in Germany as well, Zlatko Hasanbegovic. He really tried to create a paradigm of culture closer to what we have in the period from 1945 to 1945. It's anyway his favorite part of Croatian history. And I use this theater as a place and as an instrument for resistance to those politics. We did different programs. I'm going to just try to describe one of our programs to illustrate the way how we operated. Last year we had in Croatia a 20th anniversary of so-called Operation Storm. This operation ended the war in Croatia in 1995. During this operation, 100,000 people who were Croatian citizens, but they had a Serbian origins, were forced to leave the country, and a lot of people were killed during this action. And so for the 20th anniversary, the whole country was preparing to celebrate this anniversary in a very triumphalistic tone. So I thought that we should invite 5 women of different nationalities, put them on the stage and let them tell their stories from the war, which are quite opposite to those official narratives, you know, that war was pure, etc. We know that there is no war which is pure. So we got like 200 of war veterans, football fans in front of the theater. They were yelling how they're gonna drink my blood. They tried 2 times to break in the theater, and we got a special police forces who tried to evacuate us. Anyway, 2 journalists were beaten, and since then I have a lot of, I mean, I had problems even before, but after that I was physically attacked. People yell on me on the street. I had 2 burglaries that happened simultaneously in the apartment of my girlfriend and in my apartment. And in a way, I realized that theater can be used as an instrument for this broader social performance. Of course, we try to make good shows in a theater, but also to use the whole institution and its symbolic capital. If you have this major perception that is like those institutions should take care about our national heritage, we should stage only the classics, first Croatian one, and then maybe some foreign as well. It's not actually so hard, and especially with this Minister of Culture, who is known that he was. There is a picture of him with this hat from this this collaborationist army from the Second World War in Croatia. Nothing happened to him after this picture was published in all newspaper. He just got more power and more supporters in Croatia. So I think there are a lot of similarities between Hungary and Croatia at this moment. We have very similar political paradigm together with my beloved Poland. I think that in this situation, theater has to decide. The theater cannot stay we don't want to intervene. We do what we do. In a way, theater has to become a part of this ideological battle because there is one ideology which cannot be accepted in this game.
Can I ask you a question? Because I find it very interesting that Croatia is a very new member of the European Union, and it's sort of approaching this utopia of Europe, of a peaceful continent. Is the culture scene, the way your government views it, used as a weapon of reactionism? Mm-hmm. Can you say that? Is it like, okay, we're in this diffuse pool of 27 member states, we need to sharpen our image of a nation?
It's a very strange situation. There is one picture that we produce for international scene and one that we have in the country. I know that a lot of people were really disappointed when Rijeka, the city where I was used to be intendant, got the title of European Capital of Culture 2020. It was a punch in their face because we have been seen as a national traitor, and suddenly we are the one recognized by Europe because we don't consider ourselves to be a Europe. We talk that we are going to Europe, etc. So in a way, it's this self-colonial discourse very present, and a majority of people are not aware. But this minister, Hasanbegovic, I really like to use every opportunity to talk about him because I think he did a culturicide. That's the word, I think. He really tried to kill everything that was critical toward the Croatian Democratic Party, his party, and toward this retrograde concept of cultural policy, where the policy is, as I said, the refrigerator, where we're going to put our national culture not to become a rotten. And I'm really I'm in favor of the opposite. I think that the very idea of national culture is quite problematic and that it should be debated everywhere and all the time.
This is an answer somehow, but I would maybe come back to a bit more to the theater or the point of the theater, because what you both described, for me, I'm not really sure what to think on it, because somehow it describes also a strong and powerful situation of theater, because it seems that there's so much fear on this state or ministerial level that people are so afraid what theater can do or what a public discourse can be started by a theater play, which somehow is also good to have a strong and powerful situation. But on the other hand, of course, what you are describing, it makes a lot of fear. And when it comes to your own personal danger, or people are in front of the theater, then it's something really dangerous. So I would like to ask you both, how are you dealing with the situation? I mean, is it like an effort or like was heißt so Herausforderung? A challenge what you're going to take and to take the opposition and the opportunity, or it's more that you say, no, I can't stand this situation anymore and I have to go to work in Germany or whatever, where I have more possibilities and another freedom? Maybe you start.
Well, first of all, I started to think about myself that maybe I love too much this country because I'm so critical towards it, and I want to change things to to make it better in a way, because Croatia, I really I would not like to love any country. Country should be our service. We pay the taxes. Country exports its services to us, and that would be the end of the story. Not dying for a country or whatever. I mean, who wants can do it. It's up to her or him. But for me, it was a challenge, you know. I think I had a very good performative tool at one moment, especially because of this symbolic capital that one national theater has. In the common perception, national theaters in Croatia are still very important institutions. People who never go to theater, they have some kind of fear, and like, you know, when they see these neo-Baroque buildings, they all already think that something important is produced there, which usually is not the case, but never mind. So I thought that I could really take it as a hammer and try to beat, I'm speaking metaphorically, actually it's not possible to take this institution in your hand, but to to fight with this neo-fascistic politics that started to pop up like the mushrooms after the rain in Croatia. You have to know that we did not have any denazification after 90s in Croatia. I'm talking about the 90s, because part of the society tried to establish ideological continuum with so-called independent state of Croatia, which was a Nazi Germany puppet state. And still, we have those tendencies in our society. They wanted to change the name of the parliament, to rename it and give it the name that it had during this independent state Croatia era. They purified the language completely in the 90s. You had really to be careful not to say a Serbian word because you could be beaten. I was in a school at that time, and your first-year colleagues, they are very suspicious. You're coming from Bosnia, so you have a different dialect, etc., etc. And we spoke about this before. I also didn't want to give up on my language. I speak Serbo-Croatian. That's the language that doesn't exist anymore. It was official language in Yugoslavia. So could you imagine those right-wing people when they see that Intendant of National Theatre speaks Serbo-Croatian? It's unimaginable, you know. It's especially in the context of the wars in the region of Balkan during the 90s. So I think this is the challenge. But at the same time, I don't want to limit myself to any country. That would mean that I really identify myself with this country. So I'm going to work only in Croatia and never in not any other country, or only in Bosnia. I think I'm ready still to try to do whatever is possible in this context. At the moment, I actually can't work there anymore, which is also cool. I mean, it speaks for this country as well.
But what is it like in Hungary? Yesterday we had people here from Turkey and from Egypt here sitting with us, talking, people who make theater there. And the approach of the officials is basically to close or to incarcerate people, like to close theaters or to incarcerate the people who are either working in universities or in the art scene. Hungary, on the other hand, sees its culture and its theaters as so important, they want to have their hand on it. They just can't close it down and go like, is that sort of a, how do you say, an award you get that you're so important that they want to purify you, not just, you know, like put you out in the street?
I think it's the most important for the power is always to replace the people who lead universities, theaters. It's really to, I think the power is paranoid paranoid, sorry, and they really, and whenever I met people who are close to the power, that's my biggest experience, they're full with fear, they're suffering. Those people up there, they're not enjoying it, they're suffering because they also feel that somehow it's not okay, that they will lose it. That's also something we really use in Mephistoland, this kind of fear. And I think it's very important then to replace everybody, to get everybody. I was also called to the for this National Theatre to work there. They asked me, and I said, okay, I come if I can do whatever what I choose, and with those whom I'd like to work with. And then they didn't call me again, but they really wanted to get me, and they were super nice. But I think theater, it's not really about theaters. I mean, people really like theater in Hungary. I mean, all theaters are still full, and it's not really a problem to get the audience or somehow to get them into the theaters, which is great. And they even go to see very bad shows, and all theaters are full. But on the other hand, I think censorship really works in the media. It really works. I mean, there are, and especially in movies. It's just a new scandal that happened last week, that there was a new upcoming movie in the cinemas in Budapest, and one guy ordered to cut out a scene from that. He ordered that, and then and nobody really dares to speak about it. And also what the government built up in the last years with a huge work is that all media, like all, I mean, not counting one television channel, but all the others, and all daily newspapers and news sites, everything is owned and ruled by them. So it's very hard to get, if you're living in the countryside, and it's very hard to get information what's really happening, and the propaganda is extremely strong. And I think theater is something where it still has some kind of power, that people come together, 200, 300, 500 people, and they laugh together, they feel something together, they have anger together, and it's important. But I think it doesn't have that much effect on the society that it's worth to close them. So what's happening in Hungary is that, or what happened since 2010, that I can't say an exact number, but approximately 80% of the intendants were replaced because of political wishes, and there are some theaters that are left still to work. And I also work in one of those theaters, and everybody asks, is it free? I mean, can you do everything there? Yes, it's possible. We can do everything. It can be super critical and political. It's just that I think I'm quite sure that, for example, the national television channel records theater performances and broadcasts them, very much of them. My theater would never be this, in these years, would be never broadcasted. I think that's how I could describe the situation. And the other thing, I also work at the university in Budapest. I teach there actors. And what also happening is also something that's very typical, that they cut the money. So now, for example, now I got 200 euros per month as a teacher at the university. That's not too much, and so we do it for fun with my colleagues, and we will also continue doing it when we won't get paid. And so it's that we have less and less money year by year, and somehow they try to not to censor you, not to stop you, but somehow to put you into a situation that's really, really uncomfortable and bad, and they really it's a very slow and very, very secretive enemy, that it's not happening like someone comes and says, no, you can't talk about it. It's somehow that you sense it from there, and it's there in the air, and the money is less and less, and the possibilities and less, and there are no clear rules, there is no censorship, nothing, but still you can't work anymore free. And just one more story, and then sorry, because probably I answered too long for this question. There was also no clear censorship. There was no law for that in the communism we had in Hungary. I just read it today that there was. It was just that there were in all theaters and publishers. There were just publishing companies. There were members of the party who always read the manuscripts or the scripts or everything for the newspaper for the last time and took out this and that, but there was no law for that. And I think it's really a nice story. We also have it as a motif in Mephistoland, that there was a great thinker and writer, Őrsi István, who asked in 1981, he had a huge speech that he wants censorship, because then the rules are clear. So if there is censorship, then we know the rules and we can break them. But if it's unknown, if it's unseen, then it starts to work inside. People become paranoid, that they're observing each other, who is on which side, and it's really, it's like, it's a game of the nerves then.
It's really interesting. I mean, because then it's really ended up as a self-censorship because everybody starts to cut this up. But then what you described somehow is really different, because actually when they gave you this theater, they know what kind of theater were you doing. And you really talked about clear censorship, moments of censorship where you suffered, not only in Croatia. Maybe you can talk about this, because I think to compare a bit this like system of control, you know, because this is like.
But for me, it was always clear. We also discussed this before getting here. It was always clear how I can get to use an euphemism in dialogue with centers of powers. How can I provoke them to censorship my work? It was always like, what is unspoken, what is suppressed in a certain society. And if you talk about this in a theater, you always get the response from different centers of powers. Now, my latest experience is 7 days old. Last Sunday, approximately at this same time, we were supposed to perform in Sarajevo my latest production, Unsere Gewalt und Teure Gewalt. A few days before that, Catholic media in Sarajevo, they started the campaign against this piece, accusing me for putting a blasphemy on the stage, and also creating a kind of spin-off where they said that bodies of the actors in this show are covered with the verses from Quran, which is not true. They have written on their bodies, Arabic is a language, not a weapon. So Archbishop of Sarajevo, he filed the charges against the show and against the festival, and then we got also those Islamistic, fundamentalistic groups sending the death threats to the direction of the festival and saying that they will plant the bomb if show will be publicly presented. On Sunday, direction of the festival decided not to present the show publicly, but only for the members of the jury, for the journalists and the guests from this European. There is some network of European critics who were there at that time. So they decided like not to open it for everybody. Before the show, 100 people gathered in front of the theater and they started to protest. We want to see the show. And they became a little bit violent. They tried to break in. At the end, the director of the theater let them in, saying that they will watch the show on their own responsibility, which is very interesting formulation. I think we watch the shows on our own responsibility every time. So this is a very recent example. One before this was when I worked in Krakow in Stari Theater. I was doing Zygmunt Kraszinski's play Undivined Comedy, and when we did the first reading of this text, I detected one very anti-Semitic layer in it, and actors told me, but it was, it's romanticism, it was normal at that time, and I said, pardon me, but for me it can't be normal ever, whatever. So I started really to focus on this issue of historical and contemporary anti-Semitism in Poland. And at a certain point, the director of the theater, Jan Klata, decided to stop the show for the safety of the audience, etc. This was like official statement he made for media, but actually it was an act of censorship as well. So I have a long history with the censorship, and for me, I mean, it's not easy. You would like your show to be seen by people. That's why I do it, not to be censorship. But on the other hand, I think you get another audience when you attract the attention of the people who are in the structure of power. That's additional performative quality it can be. Although I'm now a little bit sick of constantly dealing with the censors. And of course, sometimes the censorship doesn't have to be open like this. You can be stopped by different means. There is economical censorship. You don't get the money for your project, and what can you say? They say there is no money. City doesn't want to give you, or for me, it was really important for my formation. I realized that actually you are always in some kind of the dialogue with the centers of powers, and sometimes it takes this radical forms, but you always, I mean, as we know, the art is the part of reality around us, and if we say that like art should be ideologically neutral, that's for me most dangerous statement, because art is never neutral. The art that wants to keep status quo is the most problematic one. It doesn't want to change anything in existing social inequality, structure of power, etc., etc.
Yeah, I would agree. I would say that's impossible to make a play which is not political, but because actually if you're just singing songs, then it's a decision you make, and you are avoiding talking about other themes. So it is a political decision every time. When I'm listening to you, I'm just remembering, I'm coming from East Germany, and somehow what you described as well, like post-communist or post-socialist states which had the experience of censorship, or like you described it, I don't have to repeat it, a non-really pointed censorship of theater, where some rules were not really known, but it was clear that you can't do several things. And then after the wall fell down, things changed so much in Germany, and we had this possibility that everything could be spoken and everything was like free, and somehow theater lost the power. Actually, at this theater, we had recently a play where an actress told us that they didn't knew what place to tell the people they are going to tell now, because before the wall it was always clear what to fight on, and this theater had this strong and powerful situation, and after the wall it's changed somehow into something you could say everything, and this kind of freedom also makes a point of weakness. And so, but now what you describe is something retaining or coming back. And I would like to ask you both, because you know a situation where you work in and the same situation in Germany, is this something which is really so totally different here? Or is that what you guys described, some tells from the future which will we have to suffer or to deal with in the next years here as well? What is your feeling on it?
I'm afraid I don't have that much knowledge of the situation here that I can answer this. I mean, I know how some theater around here or work here, and I know probably quite much about the theater culture here, but honestly, it would be not really responsible to answer this question. Sorry.
I always try to speak from my perspective. I also, in a way, I feel like those great German writers, you will agree that at least one of them was great, Karl May or Franz Kafka, writing about America never being there. And in a way, I'm here at the moment. There are a lot of things that I have to learn, but the production I did 1 or 2 years ago in Munich, Balkan Machtfrei, was about my situation on the German market. And I could speak from the very first conversation that I had when I when I elaborated my concept negotiation about my fee. This was the starting point of the show. I was actually rewriting the reality through which I pass during the process of creation of this piece. And then I wanted to, and I had also my alter ego on the stage. Of course, it's very narcissistic, but there was in terms of dramaturgy, I think it was necessary. And this character was really offending the audience in one part of this performance for almost 20 minutes. And people were leaving the show yelling like, go back where you came from. The guy was speaking perfect German, and he's introduced as somebody coming from Bosnia only to earn money here in Germany, etc. And then in this part, people were leaving the show yelling. I think at the opening night that around 15 people left the show. But in the next scene, this same guy, my alter ego, was waterboarded for real on the stage. And then you had this same audience jumping on the stage trying to stop his colleagues of doing this, although it's a fiction. I mean, the waterboarding was real, and my actor Franz was in such a state that he was really for this. But for me, was interesting how to play with the fiction and reality. I mean, that's the most interesting question for me in theater. When we stop to see something as a theater and we start to perceive it as a reality. And there are different things. I saw the show last night, Atlas of Communism, and I was really touched by some things because they are so much part of my experience, although I lived in the country which was not the part of Eastern Bloc, but so-called non-aligned bloc. And yeah, I think you can never learn enough, or being member of one society is not the qualification to speak about this society. You are exposed to different experiences, and those experiences are legitimate, and they can be the basis for your work. So I don't think, I didn't live in any, I lived in Bosnia for 16 years, then for 24 years in Croatia, and now I'm everywhere. So actually I have to find a way how to articulate this homelessness that is part of my identity. I also don't have a national identity, so you know, in a way, when they ask me to write national identity during my study, it was a problem. You were obliged to write something in your index during study. So whenever you say you write this % sign, and then those people from administration are like, what does it mean? Write whatever, but you have to have some nationality.
There's one thing, since the headline we're meeting here is reclaiming democracy. In your work, well, first of all, is there anything to reclaim in Hungary or Croatia? It's a simple yes or no question.
Okay, if it's so simple, I'll let colleague to answer it.
Yes?
I think we never had the democracy, and it's also a very complex question, sorry, but what is democracy actually?
Okay, then the way you use your theater is speaking truth to power, or speaking truth to what's going wrong within society, right? Am I right? Is this a way to reclaim, or at least to start, a democratic process within the audience and then further on within society? And why do you think speaking truth to power is? Whereas the other possibility could be creating a space that is not in any way aligned to the state or to the power itself, but really creating a place out of this bubble of power of the state. Why do you speak truth to power?
But first, if I can say just two sentences about the democracy. 2 years ago, we had a referendum in Croatia, and there was a question, as there is always a question when you have a referendum, and this question was, is marriage exclusively unity between men and women? And 80% of people voted yes. And now we have in the constitution that marriage is exclusively union between men and women. And I think it is a kind of institutionalized homophobia. They do everything to explain, but those people, they can register their partnership, etc., etc. So I'm really afraid of democracy, especially when I see what's going on. We can talk about Germany in the 30s. Hitler was democratically elected. We can talk about all those post-Yugoslavian societies, Slobodan Milošević in Belgrade, Franjo Tuđman in Zagreb. Those are the people who had democratic legitimation, a very high percentage of supporters. And Franjo Tuđman died as a president. He escaped Hague
Prosecution?
Yeah, because he died. Milošević was there, but he died before the end of the process. So I think that we have to really invent or rethink what this democracy represents. We are all allowed to make different choices, but then we have AfD here in Germany, and it's not unbelievable then that in few years those people could form a government with some other parties. I'm really afraid of this kind of democracy, and I'm asking myself what it stands for. So I think we have to, of course, there is another question: what is the alternative? We tried some alternatives, not very successfully, are we able to think alternative to the existing system of political representation?
So then I'll nail you down. Why do you speak truth to power and not open a space where you can think about the alternatives of a way to structure society, for example?
I'm trying to open the space for this. I think that this fight is actually a way to create another space where I can think alternatives without trying to create any kind of hegemony. This is what I try to do. It's always, the society will never be in the perfect balance. It's always the struggle. On the one hand, we have those emancipatory ideas, social equality, etc. On the other hand, we have a fascism, and the crime is inherent to this ideology. And of course, we like to to think that every kind of discourse should be tolerated, but the discourse that really endangers somebody, I'm not sure. I think because when we read comments under the articles today, it's you actually can see what is beneath this beautiful neoliberal surface. You know, if there are no laws or other means for limitation of, it's really dangerous. You see what would happen if this people, what would be the next step for these people if they express so much hate in their comments. We can imagine the next war and people can take a gun and start to shoot whoever. And I saw it in the 90s. It's not so unimaginable.
Sorry, I really share your description, but I'm avoiding myself to start to defend Stalinism now. So maybe better we open up the space for you to make some questions and to come together to talk. We have some more few minutes, so that would be nice if you have some comments.
That's also significant. Yeah, the silence is always significant.
Maybe the audience who's watching through internet have questions.
They make their comments and.
I think there is.
Okay, but I mean,
I think they won't have it even if we wait longer.
No, I'm totally fine. It's just offering, and if nobody wants to ask anything, it's good. So I thank you very much that you came, and yeah, we can go on discussing, because I think it was a really good description of what is the challenge on the future and this uniting background we have. And when you describe that there is no nationality and you are not home anywhere, somehow there is a home, like what we try to describe in this festival, that there is a uniting background of so many different people who are like working or fighting or dealing with the same topic. So this, for me, was a good description on what's
if you
going on.
just can give me, I don't want to anybody make a wrong conclusion. I'm not against the democracy, but I think that the problem of it's the problem with the existing democracy that we have. And Alain Badiou wrote in his book that actually nobody challenges those free foundation of inequality in society. The economical system that we have conservatives, social democrats, they agree that neoliberal capitalism it's the best solution. And on the other hand, nobody questions this type of democracy that we have at the moment, the democracy that can produce and legitimize fascism. And this is the debate that we have to keep on going. I don't have a solution, and I'm not a political scientist nor economical one, but those questions should be asked all the time. It's not just going and voting and everything is fine for the next 4 years.
Yes, it's about participation and using the possibility of the voice you still have.
Thanks for your courageous work.
Yes.
Now there's a question. Oh.
I just want to pose the question, but isn't a theater a very elite place to talk about democracy and how our system is going wrong?
Elite place.
Yeah, elite place.
No. No. I don't think so. I mean, it can become, but then it's a problem.
Yeah.
I think, and I understand your question, but I think theater, it's always a problem if theater becomes elite. That's a huge problem, but I think if it's still a meeting place for hundreds of people to breathe together, and it has also the old, the buildings, the old huge theaters are built like that the whole society, there is place for everybody in the audience, and I think it's very important somehow, and the question is good to keep them, not to be like that. And I'd like to say just something connected to what Oliver said, and I totally agree everything with what you said, is that I think democracy is just a frame, it's a possibility, it's nothing, it's just like a paper on which you can write, and it's super fragile. Of course, it's obvious what I'm saying. This is what we see now, that it's fragile, and the problem that democracy cannot protect itself. The Hungarian constitution was rewritten by this government. They made horrible changes. And the real problem was that the old constitution was not strong enough to protect itself. So that's and it's really a problematic thing. What is democracy? And it's just a good example that there is. I think there is no real freedom of speech in Hungary. And for example, there is a journalist who has written a huge article about the need of sterilizing the Roma people in Hungary. And there was of course a debate on Facebook. Democracy, and then what he answered is like, this is the real freedom of speech, and therefore Hungary is a real free country, because you couldn't write this down in Germany or in Western Europe. So not yet, or not public, and. So this is, I think it's a good example for the fragility of democracy, and I think if we are talking about Croatia and Hungary, I think it's a huge thing I could open up now, and I won't do that. But I think that there are super different historical backgrounds with Yugoslavia, with Yugoslavia's. How Yugoslavia was part of this Eastern Bloc. You said it wasn't part. I learned that it was a part when I was in school. Yeah, and but I think the most important thing, and it's also, there's a super different background of democracy in Hungary. What I can tell about the Hungarian democracy is that it's the real problem with it, that the real change in 1989. It was not the wish of the people, it was simply the collapse, an economical collapse of communism. That's what happened in the 80s. So it's not that people wanted really to have democracy, people just wanted to live better and to have the same products as they saw in Austria or in Germany in the supermarkets. And now they have it, and I think that's the problem, that it's enough for most of the people in Hungary. That's what I see, at least. And so that this change, this real deep change, I think never really happened in Hungary. The wish for democracy, the wish for real freedom. And I think this is why they still can be manipulated, like the old reflex from the communism or from the socialism still work, and that's what these guys now, who have the power, what they use, very clever.
Sorry, my mind is still about that question, that if theater is elitarian or elite, because I actually feel that theater is very elitarian. Which is the right word? Elite or elitarian? Elitist. Very elitist. And that is actually my big problem with theater itself. For an example, in this room, probably the majority is theater students or people who are open-minded. And for me, it would be interesting to have AfD people watch Mephistoland, or really, yeah, that's what we are discussing in a theater class. that was what we were discussing last time. How can we get those people, or the people who watched Balkan Macht Frei and they leave at the start, those people are the ones we want, right? And I don't have an answer for this question. How can we get those? How can we get the assholes, the sexists, the racists into the Maxim Gorki? How can we do that?
But
yeah, but no, I know you have a. Yeah, but I heard you have a banner here and to keep them out. But I think it's good, or we were talking about this. I think it's good to get them inside. I think it's good to get those people inside to start a conversation. Otherwise, there will be no dialogue.
I would part. Shamin, you want to answer?
I mean, you can do that also. I think there are different ways at the same time. We are also related to artists who are searching for ways, and as long as you're students, you should really watch for works of Marta Gornicka, for example, bringing for a constitution work about Poland, right and left-wing people together on stage for a choir, or your projects where you're looking for the ambiguity of these situations in Dresden right now, and where you approach, or there was Christoph Schlingensief doing Hamlet and other projects with neo-Nazis. So it's not something which is not experienced or which is not happening. I think the reaction that I hear out of this is a very short-thought one, because we are not facing times where I can trust on an intellectual elite which is really progressive enough to have visions and to have another concept or an alternative. I think we really need this to come together. Those ones who think that they are based on human rights, that they have borders, for example, on anti-Semitism, for example, on anti-Islamism. And this banner is, of course, not to take ideology controls in the we don't have possibilities for that anyway, but we won't do. But this is for interventions that we are facing with identities and others. And I'm not going to say that this is a naive approach, but I have to say you really have to research for what is happening right now in the speech of right wing. We don't have the position to bring them into theater. I think we have the position to look how those people who are coming to theater are not the Sarrazin readers, are not the AfD electors, are not becoming like, and who could become multiplicators for another vision, because of course we know there are the other 80%. I don't want to focus also only on AfD electors, even when I share the fear with you. I think the searching for a utopia, which is maybe the main motivation beginning from the Constitution. I mean, you know, Heuss and his colleagues didn't know where it will go to. It was an utopia to make a constitution for this country, to think about, also in theater, about new narrations, about possibilities to give other dimensions. Even when they found it as a GDR theater here, they looked for the new human, the new protagonist from. So I wouldn't be that black and white like you signed it right now. I think it's really new that we have spaces like Gorki where also safety is possible for all these people who face racism and sexism for years here. You can go in other theaters where you have these people who are going to Olbeck's interpretation of anti-Islamism at DT. They don't think that they are not in the theater. So evangelic Gauders who are in our government are friends of this theater and are supporting it a lot. I think that's really too much self-critical if I reflect your critics possibility to get dictatorships, or in Swiss, where people decide we don't want to have foreigners, so it's the majority, and it's done. This sovereignty concept of democracy, which is the one the right wing is using, is not the concept what I'm talking about. For me, democracy should be like the possibility to organize this pluralism, this radical diversity in terms of gender, religion, origin, and other so-called things which differs us. So, but maybe this is enough speech from the Gorki. So love yourself, and that's before we get the others on.
So thanks for coming. Thank you for coming and sharing the policy of the Gorki Theatre, which allowed us to sit here and talk about the uniting backgrounds and also the differences we experience within Europe. The Reclaiming Democracy, how do we call it, salon, jour fixe will continue. We'll continue on Wednesday when we talk about feminism, and we're planning sort of a small workshop. Anne Witzorek and Kübra Gümüşay, two major women in the German movement, are coming on Wednesday. Before that, we have the premiere of Stören by Suna Güler. So it's going to be a really round evening. I hope to see you again. I thank the two of you, and of course Alyosha. And for everyone who's going to Mephistoland now, enjoy it, and we'll see each other on Wednesday. Have a good one.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.